Are you the one applying the pressure to the brand name? A friend of mine today said, in today's society, we've degraded a lot of things. Apple is elegant. It's really what passes for elegance in its simplicity and beauty and design in this country. Does that put inordinate pressure on you to watch that brand like a hawk every day?
You know, people talk a lot about brands. To me, a brand is one simple thing, and that is trust. Your customers trust you.
Is that frustrating to you as you're building out features that you're trying to build trust in, that overall, outside out?
Are we frustrated by the failings of our competitors? Is that what
I got the statement. I did not know what it was going to be about. And my wheels start turning of what it means. And I think my initial impression underestimated how big a deal it is. Like, I have more to say about it this week. And after thinking about it all weekend, I'm kind of mad at myself. I really am. I think I blew this back in June at WWDC.
At WWDC 2024, Apple announced their AI strategy a year and a half after the stratospheric takeoff of ChatGPT. To some, it felt late. Apple was getting left in the dust by a startup. The cycle of disruption, so core to the Silicon Valley ethos, was finally coming for the biggest of big dogs. The disruptor's disruptor, the kings of the GUI and the iPod and the iPhone, the paragon of paradigm shifts.
Are you guys frustrated, or you guys just don't care that these features are in the works with amidst this narrative of Apple is behind on artificial intelligence and all of this whiz-bang new intelligent software features?
Apple is announcing and incorporating generative AI features throughout its operating systems and making them available to developers.
Well, we've been doing machine learning and AI, you've heard me say it, for so many years. We didn't even call it ML or AI. We called it proactive. If you remember, we're doing proactive features. We've been doing this stuff for a long time.
I think all the lead up was, what, are they going to pick Google? Are they going to pick OpenAI? They're behind. They got to catch up. These models will power the stuff.
Finally, the commentariat exclaims, Apple is in danger of falling dangerously behind. The fact they are partnering with OpenAI is evidence of how desperate they are.
I got not bamboozled, but sort of low grade, whatever a lesser version of the word bamboozled is, by the phrase Apple Intelligence and the branding of these features are all in this umbrella Apple Intelligence, and they're coming in the following year.
But Tim Cook's Apple has always been known to aim for best, not first. The only problem was that leading up to WWDC, it was really starting to feel like Apple was getting nervous that they hadn't been the one to pull that trigger first. They were falling behind. They had to do something, right? This moment, the moment last year when Apple promised the rebirth of Siri, is the defining moment of Tim Cook's tenure thus far.
Intelligence system that makes your most personal products even more useful and delightful.
The story of Siri is delivered to us by prophets, pariahs, backstabbing, heartbreak, and broken trust. It is a story about innovation, extreme failure, and inspired genius.
Here's the forecast for today.
But even more than that, to understand Siri is not only to understand Apple in its excellence, its profoundly human flaws, its deep failures, its unprecedented success, but also to understand who exactly gets the privilege of inventing the future.
Siri is your intelligent assistant. It helps you get things done just by asking.
Oh, it was very painful. I'm not even sure I want to talk about it.
I don't think it's right. Still don't. We agreed to disagree on that one, I guess.
To understand this future, the story of our intelligent assistant that helps you get things done just by asking, will bring us back to the earliest days of Apple, and thus the personal computing industry, and will stretch through the day that Steve Jobs died right into the throngs of this very moment, the start of what could very well be personal computing's final act. When John Gruber posted his essay last month lamenting Apple's embarrassing delay of the most ambitious Apple Intelligence feature, More Personal Siri, it went viral. There are a whole host of reasons for this, but I think I can boil it down to just a few factors. First, people think of Gruber as an Apple fanboy. They think that the only thing that he does is spend his days waxing poetic about Apple's virtues, which is not entirely wrong, but I do think misses the forest for the trees and misses an important nuance within the bigger picture. In one sense, I think it's fair to say that Apple's general success sort of justifies Gruber's high ratio of positive to negative sentiment. In other words, Gruber's approach to reporting on Apple is through the lens of trying to understand Apple, an empathetic approach. But when Apple doesn't live up to its standards, Gruber calls it like he sees it. In any sense, when Gruber critiques Apple, it is ripe for interest, and this contrast is one of the things that makes his blog so valuable. Second, another result of Gruber's sort of empathetic disposition is that his critique is extremely fair because it's understanding of Apple's approach.
Yeah, and somebody else asked me, did I feel any kind of hesitation or was I nervous publishing it? And I wasn't at all. And there are times where I guess I've, the read from the outside has been far less scathing, my take. And I've been more nervous. But this time I wasn't at all because I really felt every step of the way, honestly, that I'm giving everyone at Apple the benefit of the doubt on every single point I'm trying to make. And there's a line, and I don't know how to define it. It's one of those, I know it when I see it, between giving someone a deserved or earned benefit of the doubt versus pulling punches. I don't think I pulled punches, which I guess is why the piece has taken off. But I felt like at every step of the way, I realized to some degree the stature that I have on commentating on Apple's stuff. And I thought, well, they deserve the benefit of the doubt on this. And so let me give it to them. But let me then say, here's what they delivered and here's what they showed at any point in the last year. And then I thought, well, then I can stand behind this easily. Here's what they showed. Yep. Here's what they promised. Here's what they've delivered.
Despite the critique and its fairness, Gruber still ends up at a very dark conclusion. The empathy makes his argument stronger, which brings us to the third factor, in line with those first and second ones, which I think is most important. The piece was extremely personal.
I'll give you the 3-second summary. I should have my head examined.
In many ways, Something's Rotten was less a critique of Apple than an open reflection on Gruber's own empathetic approach to covering them.
No, I'm really mad at myself. I really am after Friday, in the context of Friday's statement given to me initially, apparently. I didn't even know at first that it was only given to me. Statement that the personalized Siri stuff shown at WWDC would be delayed until, quote, the coming year, whatever the coming year is. I should have my head examined. In hindsight, I can't believe I didn't call this out back in June.
Gruber's takeaway was that he had been lulled into complacency by Apple's previous excellence, by that marketing term Apple Intelligence, and ultimately by his trust of the company. He had been so wowed by the presentation and by Apple's track record that he didn't stop to think and question which parts of the presentation were real and which ones were vaporware, which ones were demos and which ones were concept videos. At his core, Gruber's instinct was to trust Apple, but Siri's delay fractured that trust, and that fracture let betrayal quietly slip in. His inherent empathy for Apple comes from a sincere place, and Apple leveraged their brand to exploit his goodwill. How could he not feel betrayed?
I want to show you one more demo that will give you a sense for how powerful Siri will be when it draws on the personal context awareness and action capabilities built into Apple Intelligence.
Right. There's like a hierarchy of realness, and which I would go with. Step one is watching an Apple person do it in front of you. And you could ask them questions like, can you type a certain different thing to the image playground? Could you say, make it a turtle instead of a frog? And they might say, sure. And then they'll type the same thing and make an emoji of a turtle instead of a frog. And I got that with the writing tools, like where it was like, here's an email, but it's really kind of plain. I want to make it friendly. And it comes out like this.
Imagine that I'm planning to pick my mom up from the airport and I'm trying to figure out my timing. Siri is going to be able to help me do this so easily.
Level 2 is letting us play with it ourselves in a controlled environment. But then once we leave Steve Jobs Theater or wherever we are in New York or whatever, we don't carry the product with us.
Right.
They didn't demo any of the personalized Siri stuff for us. And none of it was stuff that we could play with. None of it was here, John, here's the device. Or remember 2 years ago, you got it with Vision Pro. They let us try it.
It's like the Vision Pro demos for level 2. We got to use it.
Exactly, right. And it's a perfect example of something that was over 6 months out, right? That's stage 2. Stage 2 is, okay, you in the select media get to try this and you could do it on your own.
Siri, when is my mom's flight landing?
Level 3 is a public beta or developer beta, but something where people outside Apple can do it. And that doesn't mean they're going to ship. Like, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but somebody can probably think of a couple of things that were in developer betas over the summer after WWDC and then get pulled in August and aren't in 18.0 in September or 17.0 or next year in 19.0.
And they immediately appear in the 18.1 beta, but they had to pull them out of the shipping tree because they needed to ship that without it.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's why shipping it in a beta is level 3. Level 4 is actually shipping to customers, right?
What's awesome is that Siri actually cross-references flight details that my mom shared with me by email with real-time flight tracking to give me her up-to-date arrival time. What's our lunch plan?
Showing us a video of a woman saying, when does mom's flight arrive?
I don't always remember to add things to my calendar. And so I love that Siri can help me keep track of plans that I've made in casual conversation. Like this lunch reservation my mom mentioned in a text. How long will it take us to get there from the airport?
Not letting us do it.
I haven't had to jump from mail to messages to maps to figure out this plan. And a set of tasks that would have taken minutes on my own, and honestly probably would have resulted in a call to my mom, could be addressed in a matter of seconds.
That's level 0.
Brands are like bank accounts. You can have withdrawals and you can have deposits. So if a customer has a great experience, they buy an iPod and they love it, that's a deposit into our brand account in their mind. If they buy something from us and they have a bad experience, then it's a withdrawal. And so if we have a good brand, that means that people are trusting us to make great products and to give them a great experience, and if something goes wrong, to take care of them.
You have 3 messages. Your graduate research team in Guatemala, just checking in. Robert Jordan, a second semester junior, requesting a second extension on his term paper. And your mother reminding you about your father's
surprise birthday party next Sunday.
That's just a glimpse of the ways in which Siri is going to become more powerful and more personal thanks to Apple Intelligence. And all of these updates to Siri are also coming to iPad and Mac, where Siri's new design is a total game changer. It makes Siri feel seamlessly integrated with your workflow. Thanks to the capabilities of Apple Intelligence, this year marks the start of a new era for Siri.
The reason it is so hard to process betrayal is because the only people who can betray you are the ones that you trust. Trust is the condition that allows positive change to happen. But trust also makes you vulnerable. The hardest part of someone taking advantage of that vulnerability, of processing betrayal, is that it is your choice to give someone your trust. When you are betrayed, you feel like an accomplice. This means that when people are betrayed, a sense of self-loathing often sets in. Ego is killed, worldviews fracture, and as a result, people react in ways that work to restore their trust in something. Some keep it for themselves, some bestow it on others. very few give it back, at least in its entirety. And Gruber's reaction to betrayal was to give back the trust that he thought Apple deserved, and to keep the rest for himself. That is what his 4 stages of realness represent: betrayal. And as such, his framework is ultimately reactionary. The reaction to a new reality that Gruber didn't see coming, despite its glaring nature as the odd man out in all of WWDC 24. The 4-stage hierarchy of realness is an effort to create a framework for future critiques, a way to reserve trust for himself.
And so if we have a good brand, that means that people are trusting us to make great products and to give them a great experience, and if something goes wrong, to take care of them.
In portraying Siri as coming in iOS 18 and then failing to deliver.
And that's what we try to do. We focus on the basic stuff like that.
Even worse than that, in announcing the delay while keeping Siri in stage 0, Apple has squandered its reputation with developers and, as Gruber exemplifies, the media.
We don't spend a lot of time talking about the brand. We spend a lot of time talking about how do we make the best products in the world? How do we make the best buying experience in the world? If something goes wrong, how do we service a product in 24 hours instead of, a week? How do we take care of customers? And if we do that, then customers will have great experiences with our product, and our brand they'll trust it, and we'll have a good brand.
Apple is lucky in this way. After all, those groups, like Gruber, have empathy for the machine. They understand not only that companies are fallible, but that the development of technology is complicated and hard, and also why companies are fallible and why the development of technology is complicated and hard. These are tech insiders.
But I think people that run around worrying about their brand all day long instead of worrying about their products maybe don't get what they want.
Consumers, on the other hand, are not so forgiving. If all is well, they probably spend very little time thinking about you. And in the very few times that they do, you can only pray that their experience is a positive one. This is why advertising is such an enduring and valuable enterprise. Advertising is a company's way of giving their brand a better chance of coming up in your life on their terms. It's also why advertising is an enormous risk for the brand. Because if you enter someone's life on your terms and you give them a bad experience, well, it's about the most frustrating thing that there can possibly be. You've taken time out of someone's day on your terms only to make it worse. You've withdrawn from your brand account. Another way to look at it is that when it comes to advertising, the equation is very lopsided between profit and brand. Advertising is almost all upside when it comes to profit, but it's almost all downside when it comes to brand. There are so many more ways to make someone's day worse than ways to make someone's day better when you interrupt someone. And so every advertisement that a company runs carries an enormous amount of weight that I believe is inordinate with the amount of care that people tend to actually put into the advertising. Most advertising sucks, and that's one reason why most brands suck. Furthermore, the most sophisticated companies understand that different kinds of people have different reactions to their brand and prioritize who their brand speaks to accordingly. Everyone wants to reach the largest of these buckets, the consumer, but the cold reality is that the most unforgiving customer is the consumer. You don't have many chances to make a good impression on these people, on the average person. And so the chances you do get must be done very well. But I digress. Taken together, this is one reason why Apple is such a profound company. They have, for the most part, treated their advertising with the care that it deserves, with the realization that advertising that prioritizes brand is the highest order good in advertising, that profit is a product of sales, that sales is a product of trust, and that trust is given sparingly and lost suddenly. Together, this means that consumer trust is the ultimate good in business. In fact, almost everything else flows from this principle. So, despite the fact that Apple lost trust with developers and with the media by announcing Siri early, at least these folks' empathetic understanding will go a long way in repairing the damage that Apple has done when Siri eventually does improve. Devs and media heads aren't your average consumer. And as a corollary, thank God that Apple didn't advertise the new Siri to consumers.
At Cafe Grinnell.
Oh.
Hey.
While all of this story has been bad, I believe that this is the exact moment that Apple crossed the Rubicon. Because this moment represents a breach of trust with consumers, the hardest customer to earn, and often the easiest customer to lose. Believe it or not, this little ad is not only evidence of a marketing fiasco, but also of the gravest error that Tim Cook could have possibly made in his oversight of Apple since Steve Jobs' death. It is evidence of something very, very rotten. This moment is why months ago, I started researching this series, diving headfirst into the guts of the machines that will define the future of technology and thus the world. And in doing so, I found myself thrust into the past. So come with me as I take us to the true beginning of our story, the well-worn story of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak making the Apple I. Woz worked on hardware, while Jobs focused on design and product marketing. Their expertise was not in running a company. And so instead, they brought on Ronald Wayne, their friend, to act as a tiebreaker when the two Steves couldn't agree on something, to write the founding partnership agreement, to create the Apple I manual, and to create their first logo. And on April 1st, 1976, Apple was founded as a partnership between the three men. Ronald had 10% stake in Apple, and as I'm sure you guessed, it's worth billions of dollars today. And even though you probably haven't heard of this man, his decision to found this company with the most legendary men in tech history is a story about dang it. So through 76, Jobs and Woz took the whole of the business into their own hands, and they had aspirations for a sophomore hit, the Apple II. And this computer needed to be a success. And in order to be a success, they once again found themselves in need of someone to run the business so that Jobs and Woz could focus on their expertise. And let me just say, we are going to spend a ton of time talking about Apple's CEOs. So allow me to introduce you to their first. Say hello to Michael Scott. Given the situation with Ronald Wayne, there is no way Michael Scott's tenure could be nearly as weird. And after he was brought on, Scotty oversaw key hires, the launch of the Apple II, the IPO of the company, and ultimately moved on from Apple in 1981. So that's that. And because there's no way that his tenure could be as weird as Ronald Wayne's, Michael Scott rode off into the sunset, known as a key, beloved figure that brought Apple from a California garage all the way to Wall Street. Dang it. I tell the stories of these men because Apple's early years were defined by products that were successful despite the company's management. Weird dogmas and fears plagued management of the company, and The naivete of Jobs and Woz forced the hands of the company management to scramble around the core genius that made Apple what it was. But I also tell this story because of the man that brought Michael Scott to the picture. You see, Scotty had cut his teeth at the company that gave Silicon Valley its name, Fairchild Semiconductor. And there, on the day that they were both hired, he met another man named Mike Markkula. Markkula had expertise in marketing and found his way up through the ranks of Fairchild. And in the beginning, he and Scotty shared a cubicle. After a bit, both men eventually left the company. Scotty left for National Semiconductor, and Markkula chose a little startup named Intel, where he continued to work in marketing. A few years after he joined, Intel had grown by hundreds of times, literally. And thus, Markkula found himself ready to retire early. In his off time, he spent one day a week hopping around the valley, mentoring entrepreneurs, and looking for people he could connect with. And in one fateful day, he ended up being introduced to a couple of renegades.